Good morning. How's everybody doing? I am Shantanu Chatterjee. I am currently serving as the interim Dean of the Terry College of Business, and some of you may know, I'm also the incoming permanent Dean starting April 1. But I'm carrying around the interim title for a few more days with great honor. But I'd like to welcome you all to the Terry Executive Education Center today for another installment of the Terry Third Thursday. So thank you for being here this morning. It looks like the last bite of winter is gone, but you can never know. Now we can only hope for a nice spring with no allergies and a mild summer. Now, living in Georgia for 25 years, I know that's not going to happen, but you can only hope, right? So as you know, that the Terry Third Thursday is a monthly breakfast event based here at the Teak in Atlanta. It's a great opportunity for our alumni, our students, our staff to network with each other, get to see each other, learn from some of our leaders in the area, hear their story, and then come back for more. But events like this take a lot to organize. So I'd like to thank our alumni board, who work very hard every year to decide the lineup of speakers, help us organize these events. And of course, I'd be remiss if I did not thank my staff in the Terry Development and Alumni Relations Office, who work very hard to put together these events. So thank you to them as all. Now, events like this also cannot happen without sponsors. So I'd like to recognize our sponsors today. Our corporate sponsor is Synovus. So I'd like you to join me in thanking them for helping support this event for many years now. And please join me in thanking the Public Broadcasting Atlanta as well, WABE, for their support. And they are the ones that do the recording and help us with the streaming and things like that. We have some more upcoming Terry Third Thursday programs lined up, which I'm sure we'll see you at. On April 16th, we will have Tarun Ganeriwal, President and CEO of KBH Solutions, and three-time back-to-back winners of the Bulldog 100 Awards. So we look forward to having him here, and hopefully some of you can join us. And on May 21st, we will have a former UGA quarterback and ESPN college football analyst Aaron Murray speak at the Terry Third Thursday. So you can add that to your calendar as well. But without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce today's speaker, Lisa Laube. Lisa has shaped the U.S. retail landscape for over 30 years, specializing in merchandising, brand building, and strategic growth. She retired in 2022 as president of Floor & Decor, where she spent a decade overseeing all customer-facing functions and strategic planning, including store operations, e-commerce, and marketing. Previously, Lisa served as president of Party City and held executive roles at Bath & Body Works, Linen & Things, and at Macy's. Currently, she's the board chair for Zoo Atlanta and chairs the nominating and governance committee for Boot Barn Holdings Incorporated. A dedicated Terry alumna, Lisa also serves on the Terry Dean's Advisory Council and has received the 2025 Distinguished Alumni Award during last year's Terry Alumni Awards and Gala. And I also know that she's a global traveler, having just returned from a fantastic trip to Antarctica. That is on my wish list. I don't know when I'll get there, but it's good to see somebody. I've actually not met anybody who's been there. So this is great. And I don't know, maybe you can add a few stories from that trip as well. But Lisa, we are so glad to have you today. And please join me in welcoming her.
Good morning. I'm so happy to be here. I went back and watched a bunch of the videos. You know, this has been going on for like 16 years, and it takes a lot of YouTube scrolling to find more recent ones, by the way. But I was just curious, like, what do people talk about? And so I'm a little humbled to be amongst the group of speakers that you guys have had in the past. As was mentioned, I retired about 4 years ago from Floor & Decor. So I thought I'd try to talk about maybe three things today. One, I'll give you a little bit about my background and my journey of how I got there. We'll talk a little about Floor & Decor and why I think it was as successful or is as successful as it is. I often use the was because I'm was, not because there was. So it's confusing. And then last, I'll talk a little bit about retirement and what you guys all have to look forward to. So just starting with my journey, I'm from Atlanta, born and raised here, went to high school here, went to the University of Georgia. You probably won't like this story so much, but when I was thinking about colleges and where I wanted to go, my parents told me I could go anywhere in the world I wanted as long as it was in the state of Georgia. So that became a pretty quick decision for me. Thankfully, a lot easier to get into back then. And as I was in Georgia, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I thought at first I might want to be a lawyer. I'm very good at debate and like very logical thinking. And when I realized how hard I was going to have to study, I gave up on that and decided to go into the business school because I thought that would be easier. And both my parents were in the business world and trying to decide between finance, and I took some IT courses, and I happened to take this marketing class called, I don't know if it was personal selling or personal marketing, something like that. And I don't know if it still exists, but it was all about customer research and how to decide what customers wanted to buy and how to understand their expectations and how to sell. And so one of the things that the teacher did that day was, they gave us an item like a pencil and they said, here, sell this to me right now. Tell me, how would you sell this item? And I just fell in love that day with the concept of how to sell something to customers, right? How to get customers to like what you're buying and how to convince them of what you're doing is really great for them. So that was the day that kind of set my career in motion. As I went to a career fair in December of my senior year, I met up with a recruiter from Rich's department store, which I think all of you guys are probably too young to remember, but they are folded up into Macy's now. And I went into the executive training program, fell into merchandising there, met my husband there. As he likes to say, you could get anything at Rich's, even a wife. And so we've been married a long, long time. And just loved the idea of merchandising and of retailing. So stayed at Rich's for a few years, had the opportunity to move over to Macy's, which was just down the street back then. And then in '96, we had the opportunity to go to New York. So we went to New York to work for Macy's. My husband was still with Rich's, so the both of us went to Macy's in New York. And we thought we'd go for a year or two. And finally, 20 years later, we got back to Atlanta. So we were very happy to be back. But as I continued through my retail career, I went from Macy's then over to Linens and Things, which back then, and they're long out of business now, but back then was, a really formidable home textiles and retailer at the time. And then from there had an opportunity to go to a division of Bath and Body Works out in Ohio. So we were in Ohio for about a year and a half. Nice place to live, hard place to work. But, it's interesting when I think about my career and as the choices that I made, there are things I worked for a division, back then you have to rewind, not today what you're thinking, but, if you think about 20 years ago, Bath and Body Works, Victoria's Secret, they really understood branding, right? They understood customer research. They understood how to sell product, and they created some incredible brands back in the day. And that was something I was really interested in learning. And so it was a very strategic move for us to go and for me to work there and learn that. I had never created a PowerPoint up until that point, and I'd never done consumer research the way they did it. And to get a brand launched or a product launched there, you were easily 100 pages into a deck of why that was important. And so there were so many things I learned there, even though it was a short tenure. It was only a year and a half. And then I had the opportunity to move back to New Jersey and work for Party City and was president of Party City. So my husband also likes to say he's like one of the only people that would move to New Jersey twice for me. So anyway, that was a great opportunity. And as I thought about what after Party City, there were a few opportunities. And it was interesting. I called a mentor that was actually the CEO of Linens and Things back then and told him, I had a few different opportunities, one in New York, one in New Jersey. And he goes, well, before you decide what you want to do, I have this little retailer in Atlanta that I'm chairman of. The board, you've probably never heard of them, but you should at least talk to them because they just got rid of their head merchant. And I think they're going to be looking for somebody new. So we happened to be in Florida at the time, and they had a store in Jacksonville. And, Billy always stayed in retail as well. And so we drove by and we're like, oh, let's stop. Let's check this store out. We walked in this store and the both of us were shaking our heads. And, we always had this rule between us that, you could never work for a company you wouldn't shop at. And we walked in there and Billy's like, no way you are ever shopping at this store. There's no way you could work here. This is not going to be a great fit. But the more I thought about it, the more I walked around the store and I talked to the people, I was like, I think we could do something really cool with this concept. I think there's something beyond, what we see here. So long story short, I come to Atlanta to interview with Vincent. I don't know if Vincent's ever spoken or not, but Vincent West, he graduated in 77. He was the founder of Floor and Decor. Great guy. You should have him come speak one day. But I interviewed with Vincent, and he was hesitant to hire a new merchant. He had really gotten burned by the last one, and he's like, "No, I'm going to do this myself for a while." And then finally I said, "Well, that's fine." I said, "But I have other offers, and I need you to decide what you want to do here." So in the end, they decided they would take the chance with another merchant, and ended up being a great decision, I think, for them, and best decision ever for me. So that's how I ended up at Floor and Decor about in 2012, and was there for 10 years before I retired. So just to kind of switch gears and talk a little about Floor and Decor. We've been public since 2017. You can read all the press releases. You can read all the investor reports. You can understand how great the company is, how great the concept is. So what I'm not going to talk about today is, how we became the first category killer in the hard surface flooring industry. How, when I was there for that 10 years, we went from $285 million to over $3.5 billion. I'm not going to talk about that we opened over 100 stores in that time, and now they've probably closer to 200 stores. We acquired a commercial business. We, to this day, have one of the most successful IPOs ever, not just retail, but ever. And then my favorite thing I probably ever did in my whole career was do the road show and take the company public. That was just an incredible, incredible time. And we met with 58 investors on the road show, and all 58 wanted in. And so that everyone told us at the time that was record breaking, and still to this day, I think is record breaking. So all those things aside, we had some great tailwinds. We had some good macro going on for us, but the company was incredibly, incredibly successful. But that's not what I want to talk about. So what I want to really talk about today a little bit is why I think those things were possible and what happened. And so I want to go way back to when the company started in 2001. So Vincent started the company in 2001. The first store was the one over there off 85, not the one you see today, but it was behind it. You may remember the old store. Took us forever to sort out the real estate and build that new store, but it was so worth it. But I want to talk about when he founded the company, he had a really solid set of foundations for the company. And he had the opportunity after 3 stores, I think, to sell the company. And he did. It was too good an offer to pass up. So he sold the company after just a couple of years. So he leaves, and they bring in the private equity company that bought them, brings in a whole new management team, and they start to change a lot of things about the company. They all had come from Circuit City. They all had a way that they had done business. They thought that was the right way for Floor and Decor to do business. So that's what they started doing. Well, by 2008, the company is doing really terrible. On top of that, you put on all the macro issues that were going on in 2008, and it was not good. So the board decides to bring Vincent back because they're like, we gotta reset. We need to rethink what we're doing here. This is not going well. So Vincent came back to the company in 2008, and he will tell the story about how he went to a board meeting and he says, I'm going to lower all the prices. I'm going to lower all the marketing, and we're going to make more money. And they're like, no way, not going to happen. That's not how this works. And he goes, you don't understand. There was a foundation of what this company was built on, and you guys have left basically all of it. And that's the problem. So he set about changing everything back to what the foundation of the company was, quickly got back to positive comps in the middle of 2008 and 2009 when nobody was comping positive, and turned the company back around and went straight just back to basics. So he got the company sorted back out. Everything was good. Comps were great in those first few years. And then when I started in 2012, there were 28 stores. We were doing $285 million. Our SSC, our store support center, had 65 people in it. So it was small. I mean, it was a small company when I started. So the first day when I started, Vincent tells me, I want you to meet me. There was some terrible hotel up at Kennesaw. I think it's like a Motel 6 or something, like in their conference room. So I'm like, what on earth? So I go up there on my first day, and he's got, if you know Vincent, those the big white things, the white paper, and you tear them off and stick them all around the room. Remember those before everybody had computers? So he had one of those, and he had like a stack of pens, and he goes, we're going to talk about Floor and Decor today. We're going to talk about what makes it great. And I'm telling you, for 7 hours, we went through why Floor and Decor was what it was, what made it great, what the core principles were of the company. And I took so many notes, and I have to tell you, I have those notes still. And even 10 years later at Floor and Decor, I would still go back and refer to those notes sometimes, because that was the crux of what the company was. And that's really what I want to spend a little time talking about. So I'll tell you, if you have these core principles of who, if you think about it, the company's really two things, right? So there's who you are, which should never waver. And then there's how you go get business, which changes over time. And that's why I don't want to talk about all the store growth and the internet and the commercial acquisitions and all of those things. That's just how you go and get the business. But who the business is what enabled Floor and Decor to be as successful as it was. So I want to talk today just about a few things that really made the company what as successful as I think that it is. One of the first things he told me on that day also is he says, one of the things you have to remember about Floor and Decor is it's faith, family, Floor and Decor. In that order, don't forget. And he was always right. It was always about the people. And it was a lot easier, when you've got 65 people in your corporate office, not 1,000 people. It's certainly easy. There's nothing, we won't take that away from it. But it was always about servant leadership. I mean, we always had that inverted pyramid. He had a culture of listening to everybody. He had a way about him that was just very casual, very humble. And the management team is still that way. No egos, very humble. So as I'm working for him, I started in February of 2012. I think it was September of 2012. He comes in, closes my office door. Lisa, I got something to tell you. I was like, oh no, I've been here 6 months. What? He goes, I've decided to retire. I was like, no, you're kidding me. Like, I had these other opportunities. Now you're going to leave. I'm going to be starting over. So in the end, he goes, but I've got a great guy. He's going to come in and he's going to be the CEO. So I was like, well, we'll see about that. So he starts a month or two later, Tom Taylor, who was long history, unbelievably successful at Home Depot. And I have to tell you, if you were ever going to write a book about founder to CEO, this would be the one to write. Tom came in with the exact same culture, the exact same way of treating people, the exact same way of thinking about the foundation of the business, with that low ego, very humble, listen to everybody, entrepreneurial spirit. And it was just awesome. Like, if it hadn't been him, if it had been somebody else, I don't know if the company would have been as successful. If they brought somebody else in, like the Circuit City team that said, we're going to do this my way, we've got all these changes to make, I don't think it would have been as successful. So Tom came in and it was the same thing. So then he, myself, our CFO, we were kind of the core team at the time, said, let's talk about how now we don't revolutionize this business, but we evolve it and really build something huge here on this foundation that we all knew was so incredibly successful. And it really was all about the people. I remember Tom did a presentation one time to our stores, and the whole presentation was one slide with said jerks with the big circle with the cross through it. And his whole presentation was don't hire jerks. And so it was all about that, like hiring people that you knew lived the same kind of qualities and the same kind of customer service focus and the same kind of people focus that we had. There's one other story I'll tell you about people, just because it always stuck with me, and I've repeated this story a million times. When Norman Axelrod went to Linens and Things, so this goes back, I went there in 96, so this probably has to be early 90s. He was at Bloomingdale's I don't know what his job was then, but anyway, he goes to be CEO of Linens and Things when it was much smaller. So he's meeting with the chairman of the board, and they're talking about, like, what's he going to do at Linens and Things? How do you, see this evolving? Where do you see the company going? So they meet, and he tells Norman, come up with a whole big list of things whatever you think we need to do. And I'm going to come back in a month or two, and we're going to talk about what you think we need to do with this company. So they meet again in like a month, and Norman's got the old yellow legal pad. I date myself on some of these things, but he had the old yellow legal pad and had 2 pages of, like, we're going to fix marketing, and then we're going to do the stores, and then I'm going to hire this person, and then I'm going to change IT, and then I'm going to do this. And it was like 2 pages. And the chairman took it and he marks every single thing off the list, circles number 8, and hands it back to Norman. And number 8 was hire the right people. And he goes, if you do that number 8, the rest of it you don't have to worry about. And that always stuck with me my whole career. And that's the way that Vincent and Tom, myself, and all of us really managed the business. It was about hiring the right people and letting them go. And I'll tell you, working at Floor & Decor, I never had a place that was easier to make decisions. I never had a place where it was so entrepreneurial, right? When you just think about the culture, I talked to lots of young people that came to interview with us for jobs. And I would tell them, I said, Floor & Decor was brand new right back then. Like I said, 65 people in the office, everybody wearing multiple hats. And I said, you've got to think about the kind of company you want to work for too. So you can row the boat or you can build the boat. And if you feel like you're the kind of person that wants to row the boat, then go work for a big company because this isn't it. If you want to build the boat while sometimes bailing, then Floor & Decor is the place for you, because that's what we were able to do at every level. Every person's opinion mattered, and we were able to build something that was then very scalable. And we challenge people. If you are doing your job every day and something's taking you 3 times longer and you know a better way to do it, then just fix it. Just do it. There's no bureaucracy. There's not a big process. Let's just fix stuff. And that's what we did. And I think even today, as the company has gotten much bigger, having that entrepreneurial spirit all the way down to the lowest level, empowering people to do their job, is what really created so much of the success. Another one of the key points that Vincent had and Tom really had was being store-centric. And Vincent used to say, the longer we sit in the office, the dumber we get. And you know what? There's some truth to that. Every great idea that we ever had probably came from somebody in a store or came from a customer, because they're the ones dealing with it every day. And I can't tell you how often something would happen at the office. We'd start a new process. We'd do something new. I'd go to the stores and they'd be shaking their head like, that was the dumbest thing you guys ever did. And I can't tell you how many times I had to, especially as the company got bigger, it got a lot harder. I'd say to the stores, I'm like, look, nobody's in the office thinking, how can I really screw up the stores today? How can I make their lives more difficult? Like, they're trying to help. So if it goes sideways or it's not what we intended, somebody raise their hand, somebody say something. Don't just take whatever is given to you. So it goes back to empowering everyone down into the field. But being store centric, we spent a ton of time in the stores. I mean, as we got bigger, it was hard, but early on, I mean, we'd hit every single store, just go round and round. I mean, I spent at least half my time in the stores, not just meeting with the managers, but meeting with the store associates. I mean, I remember this one lady in Dallas in one of the stores. She was the janitor. I mean, that's what she did. She cleaned the bathrooms in the store. Every time I came in, she'd run up and hug me. Lisa, it's so good to see you. And she'd tell me about her family. And you know what? That's the kind of culture that we had. And that's the kind of culture that when the stores feel comfortable telling you what's really going on, that's when you can really make a difference. And that's when things really happen. So we spent a lot of time in our stores listening and trying to take back those ideas and figuring out what to do. Another one of the key things that made Floor & Decor successful, and the reason that I probably went there the most, is that it's incredibly product focused. I was doing a little short social media earlier, and we were talking about, what makes a retail brand great. And to me, and maybe it's my merchandising 40 years, but to me, the first thing always is the product, right? You've got to have great product. And Floor & Decor had great product. When I started, it was much more of a warehouse environment. It was, Vincent was buying containers of travertine from Turkey because he got a great deal on them, or a vendor would call and say, I've got, 3 truckloads of XYZ, do you want them? And so that's more about how the store was being merchandised. So we added assortment planning rigor. But one of the most important things that we did, if you think about homes in Atlanta, and now visualize a home in Miami, and visualize a home in Denver, very different things come to your mind, right? So you can't carry the same product in every store, because otherwise everybody's only interested in a very small subset. So one of the main things that Floor & Decor always had was localized assortments. So in tile, for instance, an average store might carry 175 or 180 SKUs, but our total portfolio was over 600. So the merchants would create a portfolio. And then at the beginning, I remember Vincent called me one day. He was in Dallas. I wasn't. Dallas needs more terracotta tile. Send John down here. So I'd have to send the buyer on a plane the next day to go down there to then figure out what Dallas needed, to then call some vendors to see if they had it, to go round this up for the store. I was like, okay, well, this is not scalable. So we then put in a regional merchandising team. The merchants started thinking about a portfolio approach rather than addressing every store individually. And then we put a layer of regional merchants in that would help the stores do their planograms, their assortment planning based on what they needed and what was working for them. So the process evolved, but the core of keeping that individualized store assortment was always really, really important. So being trend right, that was the other thing that really changed over time. I mean, it was, like I said, it was much more buying what was available at the beginning. And then we'd start going to shows, and as we went to shows, the vendor would show you 20 things and we'd go, oh yeah, we like that one and that one and that one. To that, we then evolved to, if we're only seeing it at a show, then we got a big problem. We want to see everything before, we want to pick what we want out, and then we want to pull things that nobody else then can see, which then later even evolved to, we will work with you on design, we'll work with the design houses, we'll pick the factory. And so then we were doing full-on product development. So the process evolved over time, but our goal always was to make sure that the product was trend right, to make sure that we had exactly what the customer in that market needed. Because even if you think about Atlanta, what you need on the north side of Atlanta versus downtown is very different. So the assortments aren't even done by market, they're done literally by store. So we were always very focused on that. We had big stores, still have big stores so that we can present all these things. And then pricing was the other piece, and that came straight from sourcing. We were one of the only retailers that went everything, or flooring retailers that went everything direct to the source. The vendors, the buyers spent all their time traveling the world, working with factories, working with vendors, looking for new opportunities. That has gotten very challenging with tariffs in the last few years. Kind of glad I'm not there right now. But it's getting that direct sourcing was always a huge price advantage. So we had this very broad assortment. It was exactly what every single market needed, priced at prices that other people could not get to. And then we were also carried inventory in stock. I mean, there were a lot of people that didn't like the turns in the store, but that is what made us different. The professional customer was a huge part of our business. And for them, they couldn't wait until you got it in 6 weeks. They wanted to come in and buy it that day and go install it that day. And so having that in-stock quantities in every single store was also a huge competitive advantage for us. The other piece that was super important was the customer experience. And that's probably one of the places we made the biggest change. If you saw the store pictures from early days, I guess there was much more warehouse, not a lot of presentation, not a lot of inspiration, not a lot of consistency to signing. And we brought all of that to what you see in the stores today. So what we did know too is that while the professional customer was a big chunk of it, the homeowner was still making the decision. And the homeowner does this every 7 to 10 years. They're not doing this every year. They don't know what to buy. They don't know where to start. And so we needed the stores to be inspirational. We needed the stores to be able to wow a customer when they came in and help them through the process. So we did a couple of things there, from displays to adding inspirational design centers up front. And then we also spent a lot of time on training, adding design services so that it was free inside the store, adding professional services for our pro customer. So really evolving that customer experience, I think, made a huge difference as well. And then the last thing I would say that really made a difference for us was our approach to the competition. I worked for a retailer that will remain nameless in my career, that all we did, I'm telling you, all day was chase whoever was doing something interesting that day. Walmart's doing such and such. Oh boy, we better go do that. Kohl's is doing this. Oh boy, we better go and get that. So-and-so has this. Why don't we have that? And if you spend all day chasing everybody else, you don't establish who you are and what you are. And we never had that approach. Now, partly because we were a category killer, we were a leader in the industry, so it was a little bit easier. But we were not overly focused on what everybody else was doing. We were aware of what everyone else was doing, which was mostly copying us, but we were very focused on, let's just be a better version of ourselves, and they won't be able to catch up. And that's what we spent our times doing. And I think that's really important from a competitive perspective. It's something, I'm on the board of Boot Barn, and it's something that we talk about there too. We have a big competitor in one of the markets. And, one day they're talking about, well, they do this and they do this. I'm like, but what do we do better than all of that? Let's just focus on that. Let's just be as good as we can possibly be, and they'll do what they do. Because chasing down somebody else, you won't be as good as they are at that. You've got to be the best at what you are. And so that our approach to the competition, I think, was a big win for us as well. And I think it also endeared us to the vendors, one, because they liked those huge purchase orders and how much our business was growing, but we had great relationships with the vendors too. I remember, this goes way back, when I was a very junior buyer. I think it was my first buying job. And we would, at all of our staff meetings, everybody would talk about, oh, I got $20,000 from this vendor and I got a 3% whatever rebate from that guy. And there was this other buyer that was in my division. And every time we went, she's getting all this money and she's getting all this stuff. And I went to our divisional one day and I said, I just don't know what to do. Like, she is getting so much money from these vendors. Maybe I need to negotiate better. Maybe I need to do this, that, whatever. And he says, he goes, what you're not thinking about is across the spectrum of time. He goes, you're thinking about that moment. So yes, she might get $50,000 from somebody today. She goes, but all she has done is annoy them. She's beaten them up to get it, and they're not so inclined. He says, I call you a velvet hammer. He goes, you get it every single time. So you might not get 50 here, but you might get 20, 20, 20 because the vendors like you and they want to work with you and they want you to be successful. And I think that's a really great approach. And that was the approach we tried to always take with the vendors. It's Vincent had that approach. Tom had that approach. I had that approach. The vendors, we wanted them to be partners of ours. And I think that also enabled us to really beat the competition from the perspective of better product, better pricing, getting advantages that not everybody had, because we treated them as winners in our business. We would win together. And I do think that made a big difference as well. I've seen both approaches, and I definitely believe that's the better approach. So as I said, we were able to take some of those core things, and there were plenty of others, but those are just some of the ones. And we took those core things, and then that's how we grew the business. Because we had this incredible foundation, because it didn't move, right? We had an unshakable foundation. Those things we didn't change. Over 10 years and today, they've changed about, like I said, the acquisition strategy and how they go to market from the internet perspective and what Omni looks like. And all of those things have changed, opening more stores. But what doesn't change is that core foundation of who you are. And so that's, like I said, what I wanted to talk a little about today. So I do think that the strength of who we are and what we stood for allowed us to really grow that business over time. So it was an awesome 10 years. I loved working there. Best job, best people, best company, best everything. So everybody asked me, so why'd you retire? You were young. And I said, it's interesting. I got to that point in my career or my life where we had lots of friends that were starting to retire. And I said, I got tired of saying no. So my good friend who retired, she's like, oh, let's go to lunch Thursday. Oh, sorry, I'm going to be in Columbus, Ohio. Oh, let's go to Asheville for the weekend. Sorry, got to leave for China on Monday. And I just got tired of saying no. And COVID had kind of just passed. So my husband and I realized we can spend lots of time together and be okay. So we knew retirement would be all right after everybody being at home for months. And we love to travel. We did just get back from Antarctica. If I told you everywhere we went last year, you would not believe it. But we love to travel. We have, since we retired, we've moved out to Lake Oconee. We still have a house here, but we live out there and we love it, right? We love it. So what does retirement look like for me? I still work a little. I will tell you, I'm incredibly busy. I say all the time, I don't know how I had time to work at this point because I'm on the board of Boot Barn out in California for the last 7 or 8 years. Love that company. Very similar culture to Floor & Decor, and they're just awesome. I love working with those guys. And then I'm on the Dean's Advisory Council. I am the chair of the board at the zoo. I have a huge passion for the zoo. I've been on their board for 7 or 8 years. And then I recently went on the board of the foundation of the local hospital out in Greensboro. So very busy. I also work a lot with Habitat for Humanity out in Greene County. And then there's a small charity out there, Victory Train, which works on education for preschoolers, which is a great way of getting kids ready to go to school. So spend a lot of time on the various charities when I'm not doing charity work and board work. We travel a lot, as I said. I play pickleball about 5 days a week. That's awesome. As my husband always likes to tell everybody, and a canasta group and a mahjong group and 2 book clubs, and I have a lot going on. So, and lots of friends out there. There's plenty to do. If you haven't been out to Reynolds at Lake Oconee, it's a little like going to adult camp every day. So there is, and we don't even golf. I can't imagine if we golfed how much time we would not have. But it's funny, back when I was working, I struggled a lot with that I was only working and how was I not able to give back? How was I not part of these boards? How could I not go volunteer my time for a small charity or to help things? And I read this article one time and it was talking about like the decades of your life. And I looked it up and I found it and then I forgot to write it down, the person that this is attributed to, but I think a lot of people have written about this. But like this one, I'll just read it. So it says, your 20s should be all about learning and ambition. And your 30s are more about family and stability. Your 40s are more about achieving and leading. Your 50s are more about community contribution and service. And then your 60s and beyond are much more about your passion beyond work and about how you start to give back and how you mentor others. And when I read that, and I probably read that 30 years ago, it kind of gave me a little bit of peace of mind. Because at the time, like I said, I was really struggling, like with how do I give back? Like I feel so bad, like I'm doing so well and I'm not being able to do this. So I think this kind of gave me a pass to say, like, it's okay, focus on all this work and you're going to have time to do all of that. And so that's what I spend all our time doing now is giving back. And we have been so blessed in our lives. And so we are very happy to be able to do that. And the one thing too, I think is that, you really have to find your passion also. A lot of people before I retired said the most important advice I'm going to give you is don't say yes. Do not say yes for the first 6 months because otherwise you will say yes to 1,000 things. Because everybody now that knows you're retired will want your time, your resources, and everything. Like just settle for a minute and figure out what you really want to do. And so as we talked about it, because before as charities came and whatever, say here's some money for you and for you and for you. But it really was kind of all over the place. And then Billy and I sat back and we're like, well, what are we really passionate about, right? We're really passionate about education. We're really passionate about breaking the generational cycles of poverty and making sure kids have the opportunity to do more and be more than what maybe their history would suggest. So we have scholarships at Georgia now. My husband's on the board of St. Pius here in Atlanta, and we have scholarships there. And so now we support Habitat. We support those things now that we are very passionate about, which is around, like I said, kids and education and breaking that cycle of poverty. So that opportunity for us or for me to have gone to Georgia, to have gotten the education that I did, to have done as well in my career as I have done. At this point, I try to give back now and I try to spend more time helping other people and mentoring people or have questions. The only thing I find is that the further I am from working, the less relevant I am. So one of these days I'm going to have to just play pickleball. I don't know. Or travel or something. Like I said, I think I start to sound like my parents, like I remember the day. And so I'm starting to be that person now. So at any rate, with that, that's kind of my story and what I wanted to share. And we'll take questions, whatever anybody has. Questions? Anybody? Oh, yes. Wait, you have to wait for the microphone. It's official.
Well, congratulations.
Hard financial questions. I don't have our CFO.
Don't worry.
Okay.
Congratulations on your career and your retirement.
Thank you.
It's not really a question, but just sharing an observation. I've been a designer in Atlanta for over 30 years, and I've really seen floor and decor evolve.
Oh, great. That's so good to hear.
Yeah, and I can go to a high-end retailer at ADAC and also source it at Floor and Decor, like
Yep.
a marble or a ceramic that looks handmade. So anyway,
Job is done.
A professional, a customer, I've really enjoyed the change, and it is kind of remarkable. Like the new building, you walk in, you're like, wow, this is so different than it used to be. So,
oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I love to hear that validation of all the hard work of so many people. So
Yeah, it's
that's
really
great.
great.
Thank you.
It's Lisa. Oh, sorry. This is less of a business question. Would you share a little bit about your trip, why you went to Antarctica, and what was the most interesting trip you took last year?
Oh gosh, that's hard. So we went on a trip in November. It was an around the world trip. So we did 8 locations. I'll go through them because it is interesting. We started in Miami. We went to Machu Picchu, Easter Island, Tahiti, Great Barrier Reef, Cambodia, Taj Mahal in India, Serengeti, Marrakesh, and then back in 21 days. And after we had done that, and I had traveled a lot for work. So we had hit 6 continents. And so at that point, we got home and I guess it was Thanksgiving time. And we're like, gosh, we're going to have to get to Antarctica now so we can check off all 7 continents. And about that day, I get an email from Silver Seas, sail Antarctica in February. We're like, done. So, so we booked Antarctica. We did not sail over the Drake. I know that everybody says it's a rite of passage. I do not feel the need to conquer that. So we flew over. So you fly, it's a very long way to get all the way down there. But we flew down to Santiago, down to Punta Arenas. Then you fly over, pick up the ship there, sail around for 6 days, and then fly back. But it was incredible. We went to the Arctic Circle last summer, and that was very different because the Arctic is an ice shelf. And so it's all just flat ice as far as you can see. I think what surprised us the most about Antarctica that we hadn't thought about is it's actually land with ice on it. So it's very mountainous. There's a 16,000-foot mountain in their range down there. I mean, it's very, very mountainous. So I think that probably surprised us the most. But, and also just, there's, it's not a country. So there's no cities, there's no government, there's no people, there are no residents. I mean, the only people that live there are researchers and penguins. And that, I think, it's just the stillness and the quiet, and it's just a remarkable place. So I do highly recommend it, even if it's not your 7th continent. If it could be your 3rd or 4th, I would go. It was a great trip. Yep. Yes.
So I had a question for you, and thank you for the presentation. It was wonderful, and also have been a customer of Floor and Decor, which was invaluable, coming in with ideas for how do we make something that doesn't look terrible. If you ask me for design advice, you get boxes and lines on a whiteboard. That's as much as I can do from an art perspective. So my question was, as you talked through, the best ideas for the enterprise have come from the storefront, from the floor, where people are encountering the customer. How do you collect that information, especially as you grow and scale? How do you filter that information for what's meaningful, what's one person's experience versus something that can transform the business? How do you understand that information? What did you guys do to make that a success?
It's hard to synthesize that sometime, right? Because early on, when we had 28 stores, if one person raised their hand in Dallas and said, I needed it, we'd go buy it. And then you quickly realize that's not good. Like, they heard it from one loud customer today, and it was not necessarily the right thing to do. So over time, as we put in this layer between the field and the merchants, they were regional merchants. So they would have 8 to 12 stores. They were the ones that were responsible for really understanding the market and working with the stores and collecting the information. And so they would help synthesize it before it got up to the buyers, especially as you got to so many markets and so many stores. It just couldn't come directly to the buyers anymore. So the regional merchants would be responsible for taking that information. And a lot of it had to do sometimes with just how many times you heard it. Did you hear it from one person who that person, and that person's always got some opinion that may or may not match up with what a lot of other people, or have I heard it in 6 stores in the last 3 weeks, so therefore it must really be something. And then they were also responsible for understanding the market. So they would shop a lot of the competition. They would go to, home sales that were, higher end luxury homes and things like that, and look at what was going on in the market. So the regional merchants really played a key role in synthesizing all of that information and then helping to cull it down to say, this is what's really important. I'm seeing this everywhere. There's a consensus that this is important for us. So we had to add that layer in. It wouldn't have scaled otherwise. Yep. Carol, come on. Don't ask any hard questions.
Great presentation. Really enjoyed it. I think as a leader, can you talk a little bit about the benefits of whether it was not-for-profit board work or your board work with Boot Barn? Can you talk about how that made you a better leader and kind of how that path has really helped you out?
Sure. I think it's really interesting, right? Anytime, I think one of my traits that has helped me be successful is that I'm always learning. Always curious, ask a million questions. My husband hates to go to meetings without me because every time he comes home, he's like, I know there's 10 questions I didn't ask that you would have asked, because you ask a lot of questions, and it's important to learn from other people. And so I think being on the Boot Barn board, I think being on the nonprofits, getting exposed to people from different industries. I mean, the interesting thing about living where we do now, the board members on our charities are ex-CFOs of Ford. And I mean, there's a lot of ex-executives that live out there. And so you have very big experience on some of these nonprofit boards. And so it's really interesting to hear how they would approach something or how they would handle it, or an experience that they had. And so I think being on public or nonprofit boards, it just gives you exposure to people who think about things differently. And I think that's one of the most important things about being a servant leader, is that you never want to be the smartest person in the room. If you have to come up with every idea, you've clearly not hired the right people. And so I think it's helped me just learn more, ask more questions, and get exposed to things that I wouldn't have gotten exposed to before. Any other questions?
Thank you so much for coming. One question that I had, you said something about a velvet hammer.
Oh, yeah.
Could you just kind of talk about how you all used that concept and what that meant? And then originally you said that when the CEO came back after private equity came and kind of messed
Yeah.
with the culture, one of the things that you said he did was he said, cut the costs, cut all this. How do you all balance low costs with quality and going after the right person?
Yeah.
You may not want the person who wants low costs. So how did you all navigate that at that time?
So a couple of things. I'll start with the second question first, but the way he did it. So what the Vincent founded the company on buying the product as close to direct to source as you possibly could, and then not taking a huge markup, just getting the cost out there as low as you possibly could to the consumer. Because he felt like that was a huge competitive advantage because we didn't have big overhead. And he also felt like, flooring specifically, nobody is redoing their floor because you're having a sale. Like people are redoing their floor when they want to redo their floor. And especially when a big chunk of your business is professional customer, they for sure can't wait for sales. They want to be able to know they're going to buy it at the same price every day. So being that everyday low price was very, very important. And so by not running those up and down sales, by not having a huge marketing budget, they were able to put that or take that out of the cost of the product. And so we were able to offer lower prices. So one of his concepts when he came back, or this management team that had come in the interim from Circuit City, they were all about high-low sales, all kinds of stuff. And that's what they implemented. So and they were spending a ton on marketing. And our marketing budget was always very small, like small single digits. And so after he changed everything. So when he came back, that's basically what he said is he says, I'm going to take the marketing spend down. I'm going to take the gross margin down, and we're still going to make more money because we're going to sell more. And that is what happened. And so it's just a math equation at that point, right? And so we were able to, by direct sourcing the product, we were able to get it at the lowest possible cost, didn't run high overhead, like I said, no big marketing spend and that kind of thing, but just offer incredible product at great prices, the same every single day. And the customer will realize that advantage and they'll buy. And that is absolutely what happened. So it's a little different than a lot of retailers think about sales and that kind of thing. We just had a different kind of a customer as well. And so thankfully we never got them accustomed to sales because I know once you're in that mode, it's very hard to get out of it. So thankfully we didn't have to do that. But it really was just the best product, best price, and the customer will come. And they did. Back to your second question, the velvet hammer thing. So it's really just about it's a relationship discussion, right? So how do you want to manage your vendor relationships? And so you can go in and beat them up and you can get a lot of whatever on that moment. But the next day, they're not going to be thrilled about it. They're not going to feel like you were a partner. They're going to feel like you got a lot of money out of them once. And they, may go on and talk to somebody else. We instead tried to create relationships and partnerships with the vendors so that they wanted to come to us when there was a cost decrease. They wanted to come to us when they had a new idea. They were happy to develop product with us. And so, we tried very hard to just have really good relationships. We got rebates over time. We got lower costs when we needed, when we had to push the envelope and get something from them. They didn't mind when we needed help. They understood that we wouldn't have come if we didn't need help. But it was really just about a relationship that was more of a partnership than a buyer-seller relationship. Because if it's just a buyer-seller relationship, you're kind of only as good as your next purchase order. It's not something that's long-term. And so what we were trying to create was something long-term. I mean, even to the point where we would go to some of our factories, specifically in China, and help them figure out ways to be more efficient. We'd look at things and we're like, we know you could do this better. Here's things we've seen. Here's ways that we can help. And so if their business got better, then our business got better. If their costs were better and they were more efficient, that just helped us in the long run. So while we didn't own factories, we took ownership from the perspective of wanting to be a partner with them and help their business grow as well. Only when we'd go and see somebody driving a new Bentley would we say our costs are way too high now, time to have a discussion, which did happen. So, yes. Oh, sorry.
Hello, Lisa. Fernando Velasco, thank you for your time. That was really awesome. My question is around mental health and mental wellness, right?
It's around what? I'm sorry.
Mental health and mental wellness. As a leader that you are, and a lot of leaders in this room, everyone deals with mental health, right?
Mm-hmm.
But my question is, mental wellness is taking care of yourself and the steps and the habits that you put in place. Mental illness is you know, when you have a diagnosis of bipolar, anxiety, depression. But at mental health, we all deal with it. You know, when you talk about the pressures and demands that you had to have in your roles, what are some of those self-care practical things that you did to take care of yourself so you can be the best leader that you could to perform for you and your team?
You know, it's a good question. And I think for me, it probably evolved over time. Not just for me, but I think the world evolved over time too. Like when I started out, nobody cared that I was working 80 hours a week. They were asking why wasn't it 81? And, you know, today you would never do that. And so I think that the world has evolved as well to make it, you know, more important. But for me personally, you know, and it's hard for everybody because everybody works differently. But for me, I just tried really hard not to work on Saturdays and Sundays. Unless I had like a really big project or a board meeting or something I had to do, like I would try really hard on Friday to turn it off and have a weekend where I just spent time with the, you know, the family or traveling or going to do something or playing some sports or, you know, it's just, you have to find time to not be turned on. Now, having said that, I was one of those people that even when we were on vacation, no matter where we were in the world, I answered emails all day. And some people were like, I don't want to see my phone. I said, well, I don't want to come back to 1,000 problems. So I'd rather manage as I go and then I come back and I'm still relaxed. And so everybody has to approach that in the way that makes the most sense for them. But, you know, I think the most important thing for people today is it's hard, it's really hard, but you've got to separate a little bit your business life and your personal life. And you've got to be able to take time and do those things you enjoy. And, you know, at Florida Decor, one of the things I remember us talking about early on was, you know, one of our buyers was a coach for his son's little league baseball team. So he needed to leave at 4:00 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Fine, leave at 4:00 on Tuesdays and Thursdays, coach your team. And so, you know what, we knew he was getting the job done. So it wasn't about clocking in. It wasn't about the number of hours he put in. It was about what he was able to accomplish. And he was incredibly successful, did a great job for us. If he wants to leave at 4:00 on Tuesdays and Thursdays and he can be that successful, more power to you. So I think as a leader too, there are people you have to manage differently, right? That was probably the hardest thing I ever learned as a buyer or as a manager when I went from being a buyer, which is, you know, very much you're responsible for your own success. You have maybe an assistant or two. And so whatever happens is your responsibility. To then I get promoted to be a VP of buyers. So now I have 8 buyers working for me. So of course my mindset is, oh, all these people are going to do it just like I did it. It worked for me. It's going to work for them. That lasted about a day. And so quickly you realize everybody thinks differently. Everybody works differently. You have to manage people differently. And so I think that, you know, that's part of it. If your job as a leader is to paint the picture, right? Paint the end goal to say, this is where we want to get to and let people get there in the way they get there. Now, if they can't get there, that's a whole different discussion you have to deal with. But if they can get there and come in at 9:00, if they can get there and want to work 40 hours a week, that's okay. But some people like to work 60 hours a week. So I think it's more about understanding each person that works for you and what they need. And then really trying to tailor your approach to what they need as long as they're getting where you need to be and being successful in the end. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Also a happy Florida Decor customer. So
oh, good. Thank you.
Yeah. You spoke a lot about hiring candidates that match the company's values. I would like to understand kind of in the preliminary stages of just meeting and interviewing people, how do you qualify them as that match successfully so that you're,
it's very hard. It's very hard, especially at the more junior levels. And I would say, I didn't really interview junior levels the last 10 years of my career too much. I mean, I would kind of be the final interview, and it was more, I hate to say it, almost more of a gut feel than anything else. But I think that early on in talking to other people, it's more, to me, it wasn't asking questions about their experience, right? Because interviews, I always felt like I can read about their experience, right? I can read on their LinkedIn, I can read on their resume what their experience is. What I want to understand is the person. So I always tended to ask questions that probably are kind of close to the line these days. But, what do you do when you're not working? How would you handle this? What did you think about your last boss? Tell me about the worst person you ever worked for. Tell me about the best. I mean, I wanted to understand more about how they thought and what they liked. And, that kind of told you, absolutely, there was somebody I interviewed that told me like the worst thing they ever had to do or the worst job that they had was because they had to work too much. I mean, that's not going to align with the culture of somebody that we wanted to hire, right? I mean, and I said this to some young people I talked to just, recently. I said, the first job especially, you didn't earn anything. That job was given to you. That job was given to you to earn. Now you have to earn it. Now you have to be the one to go there and say, what am I going to do for the company? How am I going to earn my next promotion? How am I going to help the company? That's not, you didn't earn this job. You have the opportunity now to prove that you can be successful here. And so that was the kind of mindset that I was looking for in people. And like I said, to me, it came from all the questions and conversations that weren't about what you did at your last job. So I'm not sure if that's helpful at all, but it's hard. It's very hard at the beginning, I think.
Lisa, thank you so much. Your presentation was fascinating. One thing that stood out to me was you talking about the servant leadership, kind of a follow-on for that. And even when you talked about the success of the business, you often tied it back to the leaders that had that culture of servant leadership, humility, I presume integrity, things like that. What you also talked about working elsewhere and places that I presume were less successful maybe than Floor & Decor. What lessons can we take as leaders, like of these other places where maybe servant leadership was not embodied as much, like to protect that and insulate that and the temptations that maybe take people away from focusing on that? It seems like it's such an easy cultural thing to establish. You hear it with success a lot, but you don't always see it. And I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's hard. It's a good question. I will tell you, the worst person I ever worked for was unfortunately the only female boss I ever had. So that helped me understand what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be also. And the reason this person was the worst boss I ever worked for, which I learned just as much from the best bosses that I worked from, is that it was all about her all the time. Like you almost had to walk behind her into a meeting. Like she'd be annoyed if you got there first and sat down and were chatting. I mean, it was all about her. And I think that she missed out a massive opportunity, in my opinion, to listen to the people that worked for her, because there were a lot of really good ideas and there was a lot of collaboration. And like I said, I'm one of those people that, I may have an idea of how to solve something, and that may be what I want to do until I hear the next idea. And I will give up an idea I have in about a second if somebody's got a better idea. And so I think as, leaders, that's one of the things we just got to remember. Like I said, if you have to have all the ideas, then you have not hired the right people. I mean, you want people that'll challenge you. You want people that'll say, I got a better way to do that. I got something else to think about. Have we ever thought about that? And if they're not comfortable challenging you, then you haven't set the right tone and the right culture in the company as well. So, even with our CEO, Tom, he was very casual. He is very much open. And like I said, partly because he grew up in the stores. I mean, if you listen to his whole story, he never went to college. Bernie Marcus went to his father when he was like 18 years old and said, I'm going to take care of Tom. He's going to do great at Home Depot. I don't think he needs to go to college, and had to convince his father for him not to go to college. And meanwhile, he was the youngest store manager, youngest VP, youngest SVP, youngest EVP, still to this day. And so he had this incredibly successful career, but because he came from starting out working in the stores, he was always very attuned to the best ideas come from anywhere. And so I think as leaders, and as I think about that servant leadership piece, it really is creating a culture where people feel okay to say, I got a better idea. So sounds easy, but it's not always easy for people. Other questions? Nope. Well, thank you guys so much. This has been so great. I appreciate it. And good luck to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, for that inspiring and insightful hour that you spent with us, and for me, and thanks for the great questions as well. But for me, again, reiterated the idea that if you stay focused and anchored to your people, to your values and your foundation, success can never be far away. So thank you very much. And you also gave me a lot of good examples I can use in my executive MBA managerial economics class, which I'm starting tomorrow. So thanks for that. But as a token of our appreciation, we'd like to present to you this very beautiful.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all for being here today. Don't forget to validate.